So, if you ask for assistance and I arrive, and then you tell me my services are no longer necessary, I will move energetically to the call of the next entity who is asking for assistance. And if then your ego is insulted that I did not try to make you let me serve you, that has absolutely no influence upon my life whatsoever. Because you asked, I offered. If humanity could understand this, there would be far less hurt feelings. There would be far less conflict. There would be far less neediness to do something for someone else, hoping that you will get stars in your crown. Because serving each other in love is not about stars in the crown. Your crown is already designed beauteously. And the stars don't fall out of your crown if you don't hurt yourself to make someone else feel better. Consider the standards of the world. I must suffer because they are suffering. I cannot have enough to eat because they are starving. I cannot have enough to pay my obligations because there are poverty and waste people in the world. I cannot live in joy because somewhere on the planet there is someone who isn't joyful, so I must suffer until they become joyful. And there are people who are living by those standards of suffering and sacrifice. They live in places that are cold. They're not going to freeze to death, but they're never comfortable. They will not give themselves permission to be warm. They will not allow that they can relax in the warmth and comfort and gentleness of being well tended to. There are people that are hungry. They're not starving, but they will not allow themselves to have enough to eat so that they feel well fed. They always live right on the edge of the discomfort of potential starvation, but they don't let themselves starve. They can't have joy. They can't have peace. They can't have rest, because somewhere on this ball of 7 billion unique individuals, someone is not happy, comfortable, prosperous, and so they martyr themselves to suffer for the suffering. And beloved masters, suffering for the suffering perpetuates suffering. That's all it does. Suffering for the suffering does not ease their pain. It does not change the quality of their life. It simply brings one more entity into the hell of limitation that many in the collective consciousness have chosen to participate in. And the mind says, I don't want to live like that. And our response, and the egoic mind thinks this is a very cruel response, our response is, if you really did not want to live that way, you would stop. And the ego rushes to the front of the court to defend its right of, I don't have any other way to live. This is how my life is going. These are the limitations I've got. I have to live this way. I don't know anything else. There's the answer. Who would you be if you didn't believe you had to suffer? And are you willing to live that sacred life that belongs to you? Or is it easier to live right on the edge of lack and limit, avowing that you want something else, and yet not having your own permission to seek anything else? And when you would seek for something else, beloved masters, it isn't out there. That's where the proverbial rub has come in the illusion. They've got something I want, which means I don't have it. So if I don't have it, I've got to go and get it. And if I go to get it, I've got to take it from those who already have it. No. No. Divine law says everything you desire and everything that you require exists for you right at the tips of your fingers, and if you don't have it, just beyond the veil of your disbelief. They don't have yours. They never had yours. They never will have yours, because yours doesn't belong to them. Oh yes, in the illusion, people steal from one another. They steal physically. They take goods that belong to other people. They steal intellectually. They misappropriate ideas and concepts. They steal emotionally. You've got a lover? I don't have a lover. I want your lover. I'll take them. I will find any way I possibly can to get them. Just to show you that I am better than you are. Now, those attitudes and actions and activities have been going on for eons of time in the illusion. The Master Lazarus says you had one chance to become a human. Not one lifetime, but one chance. We say you made a contract to have the human experience, to find out what it would be like if you forgot that you were divine. And so here you are in, for some, the shambles, for some the remnants of the illusion. Here you are in the latter days of the passing of the old order, not the latter days of the old order, it's gone, but the latter days of the passing. Your evolutionary process is moving so rapidly that as I am speaking with you, you're evolving. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to accept it. You can continue to cling to the limitations that you have embraced in the illusion to death. Again, one more time, even though in the evolutionary process you are experiencing, death is no longer necessary, you can continue to experience it until you're willing to let it go. Divine, amazing, beloved, creative masters. And your evolution is not intellectually based. You could say you lived the intellectual aspects. You've lived the physical, where the body was the most important part, aspects. And you are in, at this point in time, a crisis of emotional shifting into feeling spiritual energy. Letting go of the emotional reactions. And letting them go isn't getting rid of them. Letting them go isn't fighting them off. Letting go is not a war. Letting go is letting go. If you're holding something and you're going to put it down, then you have to let it go. Otherwise, you can't move on. You could set it down, but if you don't take your hands off of it, then you have to stand there and hold it, even though you set it down. Letting go means let it go. Whether it means taking your physical hands off of it, or whether it means releasing your emotional entanglement in it. You can't move on and hold on to what was. And you can't go back. Because there's no back to go to. And I keep saying that. And I say it because it's true. You can create the illusion that you're staying in one place. Certainly, there are many politicians in the government of the United States of America that are absolutely convinced that things must not change from how they have been. And there are people that agree with them. Things must not change from how they have been. And yet, beloved masters, they can't stay where they've been. You cannot stay where you have been. And it isn't a decision of the egoic mind that you can stay if you please. You can attempt to. You can believe that you're staying in the same place. But it's almost as though you're on a spiritual conveyor belt, and even though you may stand in the same spot on the belt is moving forward. So you can stand in that spot. You can paint an X on the conveyor belt so that you know you have not moved 1 silly millimeter from where you were when you stepped on. And yet, suddenly you find you're at the end of that ride because you moved forward standing in one place. And that's what's happening in the world. It's creating all manner of chaos because people are doing their damnedest to hold on to how it has been. But by the very nature of these times, everything is not only moving forward, it's moving forward in quantum leaps. So if you really want to activate the understanding of your sacred life, plug your ancient self. That part your mind can't even remember because the mind was created, you might say, at the ending of that time. Of the beginning of a new order. Not that you didn't have a mind before, but how the mind functions now in the limits of its arrogance about its own brilliance, that it will deny the fullness of your mastery because it can't bear to think that you are actually not just a mind. And the need to be right in that has been deadly. And those in Washington, D.C., who desire to prove that they are right by jamming as many monkey wrenches in the cosmic works as they possibly can, don't realize the damnation they're bringing on their own energy. When you calculate to create pain and suffering for others for the benefit of your own, shall we call it, building up your self-esteem, in the energy of these times, that becomes destructive to you. It becomes erosive. So many of those that absolutely do not want to move forward are taking very damaging substances, whether they are called prescription drugs or street drugs or alcohol. They numb the spiritual evolution. They deny the realization within self, the sensitivity. And yes, many are feeling its hypersensitivity and they want to numb themselves because they can't bear what they're experiencing. And yet, the drugs, the alcohol, controlled substances as they are called, addictive measures, compulsions, deaden the spiritual sensitivity. It doesn't stop your forward motion. It just causes you from time to time to wake up out of the illusion that you're still clinging to find yourself in a very strange place because you didn't stay where you had been. You stood in one spot and the conveyor belt kept moving. So when you come to your senses time after time, you realize you're in a different place. As you are willing to come home to yourself fully, to acknowledge your integrated, sacred self, then you begin to appreciate the beauty of what has been accomplished. You are not parts and pieces that you must hunt down and reassemble. You're all there. It's simply to allow yourself to accept that you're holy, rather than maintaining the belief that the mind, the body, the spirit, the emotions are each separate compartments, and never shall they all meet. Yet, in the beginning, in the ancient times, you were holy, all of one piece. And when that activator, that sacred remembrance, the Lemurian lifetimes, the first race, the beginning times, when those ancient memories of the truth of yourself are plugged in to this vastly technologically advanced self in these times, even though the technology of these times isn't nearly as advanced as it was in Atlantis, your own personal technology is so far advanced beyond anything that has been on this ball before. So the activator of quantum movement is plugging the remembrance of the true self into the now self, and it releases you to a much higher frequency. If you need to get away from the pain and the suffering and the conflict of third and fourth dimension, you won't, because the focus is on need. But if you are willing to focus on quantum evolution, allowing yourself to move forward, higher, then, beloved masters, where you put your focus is what you create. And you begin to find yourself living a fifth dimensional energetic experience. Now, loving yourself so well that you allow yourself to continue in that is not suddenly realizing that you're not mentally controlling your life and now you've got to do something to stay there, and that snaps you right back into third and fourth dimensional conflict. Because trying to get into higher spiritual realms by battle is the very obstacle that prevents you from achieving higher spiritual realms. Because war and hatred cannot be where love is. Love would embrace them. Love does. But war and hatred will not embrace love. They refuse to go there. So the warriors can stand and bloody their fists against the pearly gates, demanding to get into heaven, and heaven is waiting. But the bar that prevents the entry into what might be called heavenly living, even though it's right here, right now, that bar is in the limited belief systems and conflicts that are going around and around and around and around like an old record inside of the human mind. And the surrender of the mind to the holiness of self. There's no loss. It is the incorporation of the totality. The mind loses nothing by its surrender to the soul. But you, being willing to surrender, become holy. You really begin to feel, be aware consciously of your sacred self, your sacred life. And it isn't religious. It isn't arrogant pomposity. It isn't about some holy sanctimony. Because as you live in the grace of God, in the recognition of your sacred self, you wouldn't dream of wounding yourself or anyone else with those tools of separation that you have used so widely, so liberally. And really all they have brought you is the pain of your own wounding, because if you seek to wound someone else to prove a point, then you will feel the pain. And acknowledging that you're the one that created the pain takes courage. It's a bit like standing on one foot with the heel of the other and wondering why it hurts, and grinding the heel into the top of the other foot and wondering when it's going to stop. And then looking around to see who is doing this to you, until finally one day you look down and see that it's your foot standing on your other foot. It wasn't about anyone else. It wasn't about some cruel punishment from outside. It wasn't that you were being abused for things you had done before, except by your own choice, your belief that you deserved to be abused. And so, beloved masters, to live the sacred life, to own the grace of God that makes your living wonderful. It doesn't necessarily put every human being in a palace. Not every human being wants to live in a palace. And when you begin to get clear within yourself, what does a palace represent? You may find that you would enjoy going and visiting a palace, but you wouldn't necessarily want the responsibility of something that large, perhaps that unfamiliar. But to have space, to have the land that makes your soul sing with beauty, to have a home that is filled with your own wonderful gifts, designed by your own creative self, and enjoyed and delighted in by your own body, mind, soul, and emotions. This surrounds, this energy is my sacred place. Inside of myself is my sacred space. I am surrounded and indwelled by love, by beauty, by grace, by God. I am that I am. And the time is moving you forward to forgive your wars with everything. And as you began to view your actions, your activities, your desires, your judgments in compassionate objectivity, you may be absolutely overwhelmed at how much war you create about everything. Worry is war. Should I do it this way? Should I do it that way? I can't have what I want, and I can't allow myself to let go of what I don't want. So there's no space for my desires to come about. But I've got to fight off those outside of me that are stopping me from getting what I want. And they're just mirrored reflections of your own internal war. And as you forgive that particular brand of war, then those mirrors will disappear. And you begin to notice graciously in love all of the wars, the great ones and the small ones, that you have fought. When we suggest, for example, allowing things to change, your intellectual mind begins to go to work to figure out how to allow. And it doesn't grasp the concept of allowing, because allowing isn't an intellectual concept, neither is being. Doing is an intellectual concept, so the mind wants to know what to do about the situation to get it to become what you want it to be. But the only way you can bring it into the place you desire is to let go of trying to make something happen. And letting go means that you set down those thoughts and you don't keep intellectually picking them back up again like a worry stone. You let them go so you can make a space for new levels of understanding, allowing yourself to become recognizably now in this moment who you already are, who you've always been, who remained there with you all the way through the illusion and never disappeared. Even though the egoic mind, which created separation and has been the perpetrator of the illusions and the conflicts, even though that egoic mind is brilliant, it does not understand how to operate in the spiritual realms. That is why we keep saying, beloved masters, there are no words in any language on this ball to describe a lot of the things you're experiencing. You may attempt to use words that you know, only to find as soon as you say them, you realize that doesn't even begin to encompass what I'm experiencing. It doesn't have a place for the magnitude. It doesn't have a consciousness of the scope. The only way to conceive of how you are moving in these times is to feel it. But it isn't feeling separate from the rest of you. It's feeling plugged in to all of you. So that your sight is not just functioning through your physical orbs, but through the third eye. A whole new perspective of your field of vision. Your hearing is not just functioning through your physical ears. It's hear, feel. So, in the solar plexus, the seat of the soul, you began to hear beyond what your physical ears would register. And right now, in the changes of that, there's a lot of what might be called the Tower of Babel effect. People are talking, but no one's listening. Everyone's on a cell phone, talking to someone else and ignoring the people that are with them. And yet, beloved masters, the grace of living your most sacred self occurs right here, right now. It isn't out there somewhere. It isn't if I could get away from these people. It's, am I willing to use all of the virtues to embrace my divine self? Am I willing to love myself so well that I can from my soul love those that I am with, those I can see, those I cannot see, that I can allow myself to be safe in interchange with all manner of people. And the love is the protection. Not, I don't know how to be with those people because I don't have anything to say to them. Then listen to them. Don't just listen to the sound of their voice, waiting for the noise to stop so you can start talking. Hear them. Really hear them. Feel them. Observe their body English. Look at their face. Look into their eyes. Engage completely in hearing them, so that you're not just engaging in psychobabble, but that you are really involved with who they are. I don't want to know them that well. Are you willing to know you? Because as you are willing to really know you from the inside out, you will begin to realize you know others. Because first, know thyself. And then it's as though neural pathways that have been shut down in the illusion began to open. Oh my God. It's a totally different relationship with other people when you are in love with yourself, not in love with your image, or in love with your stuff, or in love with your presentation, or in love with the facades that you've created, but in love with yourself. It's so sweet. Not saccharine sweet, disgustingly sweet, not an imitation, but blissfully sweet. You can breathe, you're free, because you love, really love yourself. No controlling your higher self, no controlling your ego self, because control is the biggest war game on the planet. Saying how it's got to be keeps the mind separate from the spiritual involvement with the soul, the sacred union, the divine mind and the sacred soul integrated, rather than the mind conflicting against the soul in the fear that if it were to dare to surrender to the soul, all would be lost. And so, beloved masters, your sacred life, right now in this moment, it does not matter if the church has excommunicated you. It doesn't matter if your priest, your rabbi, your minister said you can't come into this sanctuary anymore. You are completely, acceptably allowed into your sacred space, and there you meet the last authority. I am that I am. God that loves absolutely without any condition. And so, masters, who are you to say that you are unworthy before God? Who are you? What arrogance possesses the mind to suggest that you are undeserved of the love of God when God created you holy? And so, beloved masters, not in guilt and shame to step forward to be with yourself, but in a love that your mind cannot comprehend, but you can feel permeating every cell of your being like sunlight from the very center. That all that you are belongs in that sacred place. And if any part refuses to come forward, it isn't about waiting. It's about moving forward to integrate in that sacred space with the clarity that as you are willing to integrate all that will come to your sacredness now, then all that you are can come into that sacredness and will be brought there, not against your will, but because you are willing. Dearly beloved, amazing, vast, unique, one of a kind, special, extraordinary, lovingly compassionate in a cosmic sense, masters. Beloved masters. And the churches don't want things to move forward. They see in many instances that their numbers are dwindling. And they say, what is wrong with the spiritual fabric of the country? And yet, religion has become so conflicted, so bitter, so angry, so corrupt, so greedy, in the illusion that it would be very questionable what it can give a master who is in the process of remembering their sacred self, their holy self, when the church wants to hold all of its parishioners in smallness, to control them. You can't leave the church, you'll go to hell. And beloved masters, how much hell have you found in the church? In the warring, in the conflict, in the disagreements, in the political arguments, in things that are done behind closed doors, and then the lies that are told. I never had any part of that. And there is not one walking on the earth in this time that has not walked in those places. Not one. There is not one who is so pure that they are spiritually superior to all the others. Certainly not the masters that are assisting you. Not because we favor corruption, but because we don't give it any credence. We don't worry about it, we don't dwell on it, we don't try to get rid of it. Our focus is on your evolution, on your loving yourself, on your being wholly conscious and present with all that you are. We hold intentions of the collective consciousness, allowing integration of all, rather than attempting to keep things small by dividing out into small, closed circles that do not allow others to be all right. Forgive what you remember of separation. Let it go. Remember the ancientness of your selfhood from Lemuria and Atlantis, the beginning times of your one chance to be human. Because, masters, it isn't now you've lost the chance. It's being taken away from you and you'll be punished. But now that you've experienced humanity and the sweetness of it as well as the bitterness, as you plug your holy self into your humanity, you release yourself to become a whole new race. A whole new group of beings. Divine humanity. Because humanity never believed it was divine. It was brought forth, moving into separation. It was a vehicle for the game of illusions. And yet, it was moved forward throughout time by divine creative masters, even though they had forgotten. So, it's a new day, a new dawning, a new being. And you, beloved masters, stand on the brink of the becoming, the new race. If you would call them superhumans, so be it. Not in a sense of superiority, but in a sense of evolution. Nothing in God's creation ever ceases to be. It just changes form. That's why we say death is an illusion. Winter comes, the flowers die. No. They may return to being a bulb. They may lie dormant in the soil as seeds. But when you add the light of the sun of the spring and the waters to refresh the earth in its newness, life returns. And so, to be all that you have ever been and more is God's gift to you for having the courage to take this one chance to live human, to experience the grace of living, and to remember in these times your most holy and sacred self. May the love of God be with you. May it surround you and indwell you. May it imbue every cell. May it fill you as a vessel with love that cannot be perverted by conflict. May you allow the courage, the truth, the vision, the wisdom, the clarity, the faith, the love, the compassion for yourself and others that moves you forward to embrace your new beingness. Dearly beloved masters, until we meet again, in whatever manner that may be, in the greatest of love, I bid you adieu.